Hello, I'm Demetrius Liggins, Superintendent of Schools. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you so much for committing your time and your service to this important venture. And so I'm excited to have everyone here and really eager for us to get started. A couple of notes of housekeeping. I first want to state that our Education Foundation has provided pizza. I understand it will be the same menu every single meeting, so help yourselves to pizza. We do have the president of the Education Foundation, Abdul Muhammad, so thank you for doing that for us. In addition to that, I have housekeeping as far as if you need to use the restroom, please just get up. It's down the hallway right there to your left as you exit the room. Thirdly, is pretty important. We did not put this on the application and the process of when you were to be a part of this meeting, but we are a public school system, and so all of your names are subject to open records and to public. So if there's anyone that has concerns with their names being released, please go see Lisa right here at this table. Otherwise, they will be released in the next few moments to the media. So please stand up and go see her if that is an issue for you. And finally, I would like to introduce our facilitator for this evening, Dr. Roger Cleveland. Thank you so much for being here and for doing this. You're up.
All right. All right, thank you, Dr. Liggins. As he said, my name is Roger Cleveland. Just a brief bit of information about myself, because I'm gonna ask you all to do it later. I've been in education a little over 25 years. First 6 or 7 years in K-12, and the last 14, 15 years at Eastern Kentucky University in the College of Education. And so my role as a facilitator is really to do 3 things: keep you on topic, keep you on time, and keep you on track, all right? Strictly objective and facilitate an atmosphere where you get all the information from you all and create an inclusive environment where everybody feels their voice is heard. And for all the work group members, the primary objective and the primary goal for you all's work is twofold. For the next 3 weeks or so, the primary goal is for you all to provide recommendations/solutions to the Fayette County School Board, okay? Recommendations for the projected $16 million budget gap for this school year. That's your immediate objective. You all with me? And then the second part is also, as the work moves forward throughout the year, long-range and long-term solutions and recommendations for the budgeting and planning for the school district. We're good with that? Okay, and you can ask questions as we go. And throughout the next 2 hours, we are notorious, we meaning educators, using acronyms, okay? So anytime, if you're not in education, we use a lot of acronyms. We can clear that up for you, let you know what that means and things of that nature. And so I want to make sure we had the overall goal first, and objectives. And then we're going to just look at the agenda. And so in a second, we're going to do introductions, go over some more objectives for tonight, the norms for the work we're going to do throughout the work groups, okay? And then kind of set the stage. And that's where we're going to spend most of our time today. Dr. Barber's going to go over how school financing, district financing, and budgeting works, the whole process, because I don't think we can make really any kind of informed decisions and recommendations until we know how that works and give you all a good foundation. So most of the evening is going to be that, but we're also going to give you all time to ask questions, and also going to do some group work about what you heard tonight and share out. And then we'll talk about next steps and what else you think you all need as a work group to make sure you do the work that has been asked about you, is which you make recommendations. All right, so that's what it's going to look like for tonight. So objectives. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but we are going to establish a purpose, and the norms. And so I don't want this to be like class and me lecturing to you all, so I'm gonna ask you to do something. Where's my work group folks? Everybody with a binder, raise your hand. All right, my work group folks. I'm gonna ask you a series of questions, and you cannot ask me any questions, okay? All you gotta do is raise your hand. If you were walking down the street and a building was on fire, how many of y'all would rush into that building? Show of hands. Okay. You're walking down the street, a building's on fire, and there's some people in that building. How many of y'all would rush in? Okay, a couple, sure and sure. All right, we're getting there. You're walking down the street, building's on fire, there's some people in that building, and some of those people were your relatives. How many of y'all would rush in? Some of y'all said it depends on the relative, right? So we're getting there. Here's my point. People are not going to follow you unless they know your purpose and your mission. But more importantly, people are not going to take a risk unless there's a relationship. And so over the next few months, we want to make sure we build a professional relationship in here that's inclusive and everyone has their voice and there's trust and things of that nature. So we want to make sure we have a shared purpose, and that is to make recommendations and solutions to the board. The second is build understanding of district finance, and I said the barber is going to do that part. He's going to give us the landscape over the district around finances and what your role is, and that is to make recommendations at the end of the day to the school board, okay, about the current projected budget and then long-term planning and solutions. Limitations. You make recommendations, advise, but you're not a decision-making group, okay? So you don't make the decision. The board will make that decision, but you advise, recommend and advise, okay? Is that clear? We're good with that? Okay. Promote transparency and shared accountability. Some of these are getting the norms also. Foster trust and collective ownership, and align on next steps. We want to get you all's feedback after today. What are some other things you think we need to do to make sure that you can actually execute the main purpose, objective, which is provide recommendations? So, who's in the room? Now, we have a mic here. You can come up here to introduce yourselves. We want to hear you because we're recording this and things of that nature. So I just kind of want you all to introduce yourselves, kind of like I did. It took me like 10 seconds. All right? I don't want the bio, or the resume, but I want people to know who's in the room, okay, and what your role is, because you were selected for a specific purpose, right, but not to represent a specific group of people, okay? It was very purposeful. So we have to do an order. Who would like to introduce themselves first? And we have the mic right there. Maybe some people use the mic over there. Come over. Doc, you think it's the best way to do this? Is there another mic we can use? Come on up.
Hi, I'm Erica Pennington. I'm president of the Fayette County Education Association.
Thank you. We'll just start over here.
Don't like you. I'm Mark Little. I work for Habitat for Humanity. I've been there 23 years.
Okay. Yes. Go ahead, Jessica.
I'm Jessica Berry, VP of Community Impact for the YMCA of Central Kentucky, and also a product of Fayette County Public Schools.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Barbara Starrett. I'm a retired Fayette County school teacher.
I'm Jenna Jennings, and I'm representing PTA.
Hello, Lisa Bell, Vice President of Finance, Facilities, Operations, and IT for Bluegrass Community and Technical College, and a resident of Fayette County.
My name is Chad Peevler. I'll be starting my 30th year as a teacher in Fayette County, and I'm a member of AFT.
Hi, I'm Laura Jones. I am an attorney and a trust officer for a financial services group in town, and I have two daughters, one who's a recent graduate and a rising 9th grader. So, thank you.
Hi, I'm Nikki Kaiser. I'm a school bookkeeper here in Fayette County, but I'm also representing FCPS, Fayette County Education Support Professional Association.
I'm Ron Edmondson. I'm a pastor at Emmanuel Baptist.
I'm Alan Stein, long-time retired Lexington Legends president and currently on the Fayette Education Foundation.
I'm Abdul Muhammad, outgoing chair of the Fayette Education Foundation. I work for West Banco Bank, market president here in Lexington.
I'm Neha Cherian, and I'm a junior at Paul Lawrence Dunbar High School.
I'm Christina Lancaster. I'm a rising senior at Bryan Station High School.
I'm Bailey Hauswald. I'm currently a rising senior at Tates Creek High School.
I'm Carrie Paul. I'm the principal at Tates Creek Elementary School. Been in Fayette County. This is starting my 22nd year. I have 2 girls in Fayette County schools, and I'm a Fayette County resident. Proud of all those things.
I'm Rob Shear. I'm the general manager of SRC Lexington here in Lexington.
My name is Roman Henderson. I am a claims manager for the Hartford Insurance Company, concerned community member and product of FCPS.
Brian Kennedy, program director at the Learning Center. I also have 2 kids in Fayette County and have been here for 20 years.
Rabbi David Wirtschafter, Temple Adith Israel here in Lexington. I am a Fayette County resident and an alum of Cassidy Elementary and the proud parent of 2 young people now in their 20s who were at Henry Clay.
Hunter Stout, CFO Keeneland, board member for Commerce Lexington, daughter at Cassidy Elementary, and son that'll be there one day.
Heather Hardesty. I'm a senior academic advisor at the University of Kentucky. I'm in a doctoral program in educational leadership there, and I have a son who'll be starting in FCPS soon.
Hi, I'm Kelsey Cross, and I go to TLC. I'm going to be a rising senior. Thank you all for inviting me.
Thank you all for giving your time. Thanks again for putting this work, and real important work. A little feedback over there. Oh, I didn't say that all 3 of my children went through Fayette County Public Schools also. So the norms for this work group, some are pretty to the point. No shame. We're focused on the purpose of the work, not people. No blaming. We're trying to get to solutions. Stay on topic. It's critical. Share the airtime. Loyalty to the absent. Anybody have an idea what I mean by that? What do you think I mean by loyalty to the absent as a work group?
Trying to represent those that are here in this community.
Okay, trying to represent, that's one piece. Anyone else? Yes. Okay, you don't want to interpret what they may say, right? And the other thing is, you all are going to provide a lot of good information for this meeting and the next 2 meetings, but we don't want to be on social media trying to speak for somebody else in the work group, right? So you may express some great questions and things of that nature, and then someone else on the work group, tries to interpret that somewhere else in social media and things of that nature. So be loyal to each other so we can create trust and things of that nature. All right, and then keep open mind. Everybody's not going to agree with each other, may not understand a question, things like that, but always keep open mind in doing the work. Now, I'm an educator, so I got to give you an assessment or a test. What is the primary goal / objective for this work group? Anyone? What is the primary goal? Yes? Okay, to what else? But recommendations? Yes, for the board. Okay. Do we make the decision or we just make recommendations? Okay, recommendations. All right. And what's the second part of that? She gave us the first part. What's the second part? Making recommendations, solutions for what? Long-term solutions. All right, great. Good job. All right. So I'm going to have Dr. Barber come up And this part, and we talked before, that is critical for you all to have as enough information as possible to provide viable recommendations to the board. And so he's going to kind of give us a landscape of how budgeting and district planning and financing works. You can ask him questions throughout, because even though I'm in education, this is not my thing. And so I don't know budgeting and financing like he does. So anytime you have a question, comment, or whatever, just raise your hand and we'll get to you. Okay? We're good with that? Here you go, sir.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here today. Name is Houston Barber, Deputy Superintendent, and appreciate your time and attention to this matter. And I feel like I know many of you and have worked with you closely. Tonight, what I hope is to be able to explain how the budget process works, what we have to go through as a district to walk through and analyze and predict how we move, how we navigate, while also giving you facts and figures and allowing you to see for yourself the context and truth surrounding what is involved with our budget and how we got here. First and foremost, though, I want to say this. These are 4 promises that we have made to the community, and these are critical because they drive our budget. They drive the board's decision making. When you think about the portrait of a graduate, it's what we want our students to be able to walk out and do and have these skill sets and be able to demonstrate. And we want to be able to measure this along the way. But it's a promise that we've made, and we've actually worked with local businesses and industry and community members to come up with these promises. So it's a promise we've made with you, and that is to be civically engaged and culturally competent, reflective and resilient, future and life ready, and lifelong learner. Each of these has different types of metrics associated with it. But why are we talking about this at a budget meeting? Well, this is what drives a lot of decisions that are made at the board level, at the superintendent level, and as a district for our students. And to that, we have a strategic plan. This strategic plan is so critical to what we do. In fact, when the superintendent came on board, Dr. Liggins made a commitment to this community to get feedback from you about what your expectations were and are for our students and our families, and what we need to do for our students and how we go about doing it. In fact, there was countless hours, it was over a course of a year or longer to build out the strategic plan, and it had thousands of feedback points. In fact, these feedback points were from many of you, and if not, many of your colleagues and significant others played a role in this. It was so significant, it has been transformational in how successful our schools have been as of late. So there's been a lot of academic success because of this strategic plan. This is what drives every decision that the board makes, financially, strategically, and as we move forward. So when the superintendent brings recommendations, it's been vetted all the way through in terms of how the strategic plan operates. So for example, when a decision is made about a curriculum that we're investing in, there's a process to it, but it's also, how does this fit with the strategic plan? If it does not fit, it's automatically eliminated because it just doesn't make sense. So when budget decisions are made and how they're moving forward, it's as a result of this strategic plan. And one of the commitments that Dr. Liggins makes and has made is he doesn't want to wake up 20 years from now and say, we just had a strategic plan on paper. He wants to have a transformational strategic plan. And if you've monitored the results the last several years, it is working. And that's why we drive our decision-making, and the board's decision-making is based on this strategic plan. So you can tell we have student achievement, unity, belonging, and student efficacy. And again, Each one of these is critical, but the most important being student achievement. But we also believe in giving a culture of unity and belonging, closing the gaps, opportunity gaps that exist for many of our children. The highly effective culturally responsive workforce. We want to retain, so some of the decisions you've seen along the way, we want to retain this workforce, build it out so we have quality taking place in the classroom. It drives down to the desks of our students. This is why we want to have the highest salary in the state of Kentucky, because we get quality teachers. If you don't have quality teachers, you don't have quality instruction. And so outreach and engagement, we engage our students, employees, families. We want to this is part of that process, and we believe in it strongly. And finally, how do we become more efficient, effective? How do we have processes that work? I can assure you that when every day we're trying to continuously improve, and this plan helps to drive that home. We have metrics. We have meetings once a month to evaluate where we are. We have an executive roundtable team that helps to relay out information. We've engaged our principals, who engage their communities, who engage their different employees and various students across the district. And so I'm bringing this home because this is what drives our decision-making for budgets, the strategic plan. Without it, we would make haphazard decisions or recommendations and not have a plan and a guide that takes us there. So with that said, let's move on to the next slide here. How does budget and staffing work in Kentucky? It's an odd thing. It's a really weird experience if you've never experienced what budgets look like, because most are based on fiscal years or based on a June 30 end date, right? If you're in a business world, typically. But in Kentucky, it's different for school budgets. So for example, the draft budget is actually due in January. So we start the process in January to get a draft budget. And so that's where we start looking at our enrollment. We look at different patterns that are taking place throughout the community. And this is important for you to know because we start making decisions at that moment and getting feedback and looking at data and analytics surrounding how many kids are going to be here next year. And that's hard to predict, but we use a partner in Davis Demographics, and they help us to correlate what's going to happen and how students may be shifting and moving and where we need to go with in terms of people living. So that helps that analysis. That said, we move to the next critical point, which is May, and that's where you adopt a tentative budget. But let me talk about the in-between. So from January to May, and by the way, tentative means it's not final. We don't have all our sources of income ready for us. We won't know until in the fall, which we've already started the school year. So you can imagine, most businesses would know their income and revenue. We don't have the actuals come alive until after September 30th. Now imagine that. We're already in school in August. So if we are all of a sudden presented with something different in September, we have to punt and make a decision based on that. So prediction is very critical for budgeting. So with that said, we do initial staffing and we do allocations for school-based decision-making councils, which is a law here in Kentucky. We begin those predictions in February, and they start to size up what happens. We have a budget and finance committee meeting during that time frame. So we start these committee meetings with this information and use it to begin the process of getting input from both externally and internally. And this happens in February, and in January is kind of the kickoff point. Then, as you probably know, we have not just a budget and finance committee, but we kick off a budget workshop which took place in February 27th of 2025. So we actually had a huge process with our board team where we talked about persistent financial strain. We talked about balancing resources, revenues versus expenditures. We talked about budget and something called SEEK. SEEK is how we're funded. So SEEK, it stands for Supporting Education Excellence in Kentucky, but it's a distribution formula. It's the money that comes to us through the state that is distributed based on property valuations, basically, and your attendance, your average daily attendance. Now, I'm bringing this to your attention because that's how we're measured for SEEK, which is about $89 to $100 million every year. So of our budget, the state provides just about 89 to 100 million. That's not the entire budget. Think about that. Most of it comes from local taxes. So really, the local people are funding our public schools. The state is providing a small amount. It's significant, but it's not the entire. It's, if you look at it, 1/9 of the budget, 1/10, so to speak. Again, then we began in that budget workshop. We looked at proactive problem solving. We started talking about what the strategic investments were. So if you look at the budget timeline in your packets, you can see that we took a lot of time on that February 27th with the board team to talk about what's happening, what we're doing, where we're going, and these opportunities that exist that we're looking at, from strategic investments to proactive problem solving. And we even at that time had talked about a proactive approach that we took in November and December from the superintendent himself, looking forward and forecasting in a brilliant way to test our budgets and departments at the central office. He said, why don't we take a look at this and examine and cut 10% right now? So we tried that out and we evaluated it. And as you'll see, we've had a proposed recommendation to cut 20%, and this is central office budgets. So we are making cuts, and it was such a profound experiment yet review that it's going to work because our focus is on keeping our schools intact and the support that we provide. Also, board planning and regular meetings. We had April 17th. You can see we looked at the turbulence in the marketplace, what's happening, the general fund overview. We talked about budget topics. I'm going to go through everything. We had context that took place on April 28th. Just for your knowledge, 85% of our budget goes to personnel. Now think about that. 85%. That leaves us with 15% to cover for operations, things that are happening day to day. That's not that much. And we then began to talk with the board about, and we presented the tentative budget on May 12th, which I'll get into more here in a moment. And so by May 27th, we had a short timeline to come up with recommendations on this $16 million projected gap. And that's how we got to the recommendations surrounding the OLT, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So, with that said, you can see that then we go through this process of year-end closing for us, like most businesses do, but we're already starting to pay out teachers, well, staff starting in July, and teachers obviously don't come back till a little bit later. And then we have August where we have Budget and Finance Committee meetings, but it's not until September we get a working budget. That means we're in school, kids are already in classrooms, buses are already running, lunches are already being served, and we don't know what money's coming to us until September 30. That's pretty scary, don't you think about it, as running a business. Because the reality is they could cut Seek, they could cut other things, and we would be, that's why we have something called a contingency. And contingency is not to do long-term closing gap for sustainability. It's to be used for one thing. That's for one-time expenditures where there is a crisis. And what I mean by that is to cover a one-time cost, not to cover something that's going to be perpetual. So what's wild about this is we get tentative Seek budget in September, which means our working budget, which is most of our revenue, is covered, but we don't even know our full Seek allotment until basically the end of, or in May. So that's the odd thing about this whole thing. So that's why it's really important that we have prediction correct and use analytics surrounding it. So what do we have here? So by the numbers, our estimated general fund revenue is going to be approximately $699,546,000. Our general fund contingency is $41,972,000. Again, this is projected, and it is us planning, and the contingency is for one-time expense on crisis, not to be utilized for perpetual challenges. Our general fund expenditures, as you can see, outweigh what is our expected general fund revenue, and our total estimated tentative budget, and it can fluctuate, I just want you to know, because it depends on the level of funding that comes in for federal funds and for grants. So that can actually go up and down by quite a bit, but general fund is more precise because we have a better prediction on what our revenues are going to be. So as you can see, the difference of what we're expecting next year is $16,139,000. This is not a deficit right now. Our spending and our revenues are matching up. This is a projected shortfall for next year where they won't match up. So I want to make that clear. And so for that knowledge and for your knowledge, it is a projected gap. As was presented to our board, we do have the highest starting salary in Kentucky. We have the lowest student-to-teacher ratio. And what this means, this doesn't mean actual class size. This means the number of teachers that we actually distribute out. So for example, people might say, well, why is our classes not 13-1? Well, this also includes instructional coaches. This includes instructional resources and staff throughout the district. It is encompassing of all ratio. It is not representative of a classroom actual amount. So that I want to make that clear. Also, our graduation rate's gone up from 89% in 21-22 up to 93% for four-year graduation rate. So these investments have been critical. Just a couple contexts, as we mentioned, personnel is about 85%. Our historic increases in salary started in 22. The board did some things that have led to massive costs and have led to an investment in personnel. And that is they leveled up on experience in fiscal year 22. Then they created a classified compensation study, and they acted on that as a board, and that created a huge expense to bring our level classified staff up to market. And then there was a certified compensation study where we brought certified teacher salaries up to market, and that was significant investment, which also led to the highest starting salary, minimum starting salary. But what that did was create a situation, and that is we actually had more experienced teachers and staff start to come in, and so it started to cost us more because people wanted to be in this district. So it wasn't like people were coming in at the minimum level. They actually were coming in at higher levels, and so it cost the district a significant more amount to cover. So those 3 years of leveling up And listen, the board did not give raises other than step raises for 4 to 5 consecutive years prior to that. So it led to a big gap. And what one could think about is that's where we tried to level up, and when you level up, it's going to be significantly more. So, one of the other things is that, food service days, when you have NTI, it causes a little bit of a challenge in this sense, and that is you still have to cover the cost of food service workers, other workers, and so that becomes a challenge because your non-traditional instructional days, you still have to cover costs, and you lose out on potential funding for meals. So, for example, we get paid by certain federal dollars for meals. That cost is lost when you don't have those NTI days, or when you have NTI days. We've had insurance increases, utilities, infrastructure, and you'll see specific numbers. There has been a flat enrollment. I'm just going to be straight with you. This is, when you don't have a significant growth in enrollment, you will not see a large increase in funding for your SEEK. Even though there has been a growth with transportation and SEEK, your flat enrollment, and if you add buildings to a district, which we've created, we've had a brand new middle school that we just opened. We have a brand new opportunity here, which is great. And we're looking to open a brand new elementary school. But if we're not closing things, we're adding overhead costs, we're adding labor costs, and we're adding transportation costs. So those are things to think about. Prioritizing the classroom. We've protected our schools, made historic advancements the board has. We talked about some things that we've done and we'll talk about some reductions that we've made, but we did move away from things like long-term disability, which is what we've taken out of the budget for next year. And, we've also looked at some other things that we've reduced, and we'll get into specifics here in a moment. But I think the most important thing is that this group has to think about what options are really out there. And how can we not just reduce expenditures, but also think about additional revenues or where other revenues can come from. And some of those, there's some creative things to think about. Do we have ways of getting other grants to support things we do? Do we have other tax revenue options that we've talked about or haven't talked about? What about Virtual Academy? Can we grow Virtual Academy and create tuition experience that brings in more revenue? Efficient foundation utilization, we got to continue to grow our partnership with FEF, and more efficient use of buildings and related resources. I think that's critical because if you don't have proper rotation schedules, you can imagine how much HVAC costs. And if you don't have a rotation schedule that fits, it can create problems for the future because you have to make sure you're having a schedule that works for the entire district and makes sense. So with that said, these are numbers that are estimated revenues for next year. And you can see we already receive a lot of dollars in property tax. And one of the community concerns, reason we didn't talk about property tax as a solution, is not raising property taxes any more than we had to. And that's one of the reasons that we talked about the OLT. Because property taxes, the community has invested. We understand that. And so that was something that wasn't really a solution that we felt was viable because you guys have done so much to support us, especially with the safety tax and with the building nickel, which I'll explain. Which, by the way, for this group's knowledge and intricacy, There is restricted funding for school districts, and there is cash general fund. Those are two things you need to be aware of. Because when we did a nickel that was for restricted funding, it cannot be used to cover staffing. It cannot be used to purchase another teacher. But it can be used to renovate buildings. It can be used to actually work on certain HVAC systems. It can be used to cover things that are covered by restricted funding. I say that because our cash flow is actually really good. The issue is where can the cash be used? So for example, our bonding capacity went up significantly. We would have had no chance for a 5-year period to actually to pay for something like even STEM Rise School or a new elementary or Henry Clay High School. It wouldn't have been in the funding. The nickel led to that opportunity. But it can't be used for purchasing a teacher or staff, just for recognition. But if you look at these resources, we already get in utilities tax, $24 million, approximately occupational license tax, about $57 million comes towards us. That's at our current rate. We get small amounts revenue in lieu of taxes, very little from tuition. Interest income, building rentals are small. Bus rentals used to be higher, but it's harder for us to rent our own buses out. And just, you can see the overall revenue sources. This is approximate from SEEK. We're anticipating a bigger SEEK amount, but that could change. Because, as mentioned, it's all based on enrollment, but transportation has beefed it up a little bit more, but we're still not 100% funded. And as you can tell, we don't know, Medicaid reimbursement, we're counting on some more dollars there, but we don't know because there's obviously some things in the air with that, and that's something we can't necessarily rely on more additional funding. Let's talk a little bit about, let's get into our expenditures, actually. So let's talk about this contingency. The district has a policy for a 6% contingency. It's required by the board. The state requires a 2% contingency. That is something, obviously, the board would have to change to adapt and adjust that contingency. Salaries are significant, as you can tell, the cost. If we were to do a step increase, which is already proposed in the budget, it's over $5.6 million, and that happens typically every year. I haven't seen it where it hasn't happened. The other thing is insurance has gone up, utilities. KISTA's a bus lease. We're trying to move away from having to pay bus leases there's something called geothermal bonds now. We can use bonding to help purchase our buses, so that I can take that expense off of the general fund, which I think is a very powerful opportunity for the district. You can see some other expenditures and some non-campus department budgets combined. Some fixed expenditures, especially related to schools. Subs are costing a lot of money. If y'all have some good solutions for subs, I would love to hear it. We really would. Can I tell you why? The new generation takes off a whole lot more, and I'm just, maybe I shouldn't say it out loud, but they do. They literally take off and use their days, their sick days. It used to be where no one took sick days. And they come in, and they're taking them. And our principals can probably attest to that. They may not say it publicly, but I will. So the other thing is a lot of these things, the nurses' contract with the health department is about $4.7 million, $700,000 more dollars. for this year. And they did give us Medicaid back, but let's hope that that comes to life. Preschool operating is a little bit, it's fixed, and there's even more cost that we're seeing come alive to that. And, you know, you can kind of say, I mean, diesel, we didn't have a fixed price on diesel. Had we spent some time with this several years ago and had purchased a price on diesel at a flat rate, it was a risk. We could have probably protected and saved, but it's hard to do that because it can go up and down. And so it's hard to know what the price of diesel is going to be. Some of the board priorities, and again, this is based on strategic plan work along with what the board has asked us to invest in. The board has been intentional. They will not raise lunch prices. That is causing a deficit. And to be truthful, it's going to continue to cause a deficit because if we don't do that, and there's not a decision made to do that, we lose funding. And so it's going to continue to grow. That $1 million is just an estimate. It's going to probably cost the general fund way more. So just be thinking about that in your back pockets. The proposed 1% raise, they weren't willing to negotiate any different based on the vote. And Frisk salary increase, I think, is a worthy cause. AVID is something that's advancement via individual determination program, which is college advancement. It's in 4 schools being piloted, and it's something where the board has taken on that is a priority to help support college and career readiness. Dual credit has been highly successful, saving over $13 million for families for college costs. I think it's been really powerful. And Grow Your Own, as you know, has really invested not in just our young people, but in our own people to invest in teaching pathway and career. So that's over $7 million. Here are some reductions, eliminations that we've already taken on. As mentioned before, we took on the experiment of reducing 10% for our departments in last November-ish. And some of it worked, some of it didn't, but we're advancing kind of forward with those that can handle it and the operations can handle it at district level. We're going to do 20%. We're obviously eliminating some things, as you can tell. But one important thing is we eliminated $1.1 million worth of John D. Price and non-campus positions. So just to be clear, we've eliminated positions that existed, and through attrition, we are not filling those positions, and we're not going to. So you can kind of see some of the eliminations that we've taken on. And so, in summary, you can kind of tell we have a general fund, we have special revenues, which includes our federal funding supports, and what we call Fund 2. Food service is a self-sustaining enterprise. And then we have capital outlay and building fund, which is where that's restricted funding. What continues to cost us more, there was a safety tax in 2017 that the community took on. It's so powerful in what it's been able to do with everything from SROs, school resource officers, to nurses, to other supports, mental health supports, counselors. But what's costing us now is over $10 million more to cover the cost of that 10-point safety plan that the community invested in. So you can imagine the general fund is having to take a brunt of that cost when we took on the opportunity to help support our schools. And we're one of the nationwide models in terms of supporting our schools for safety. And we're not perfect. But the other part of the building fund is allows us to actually build schools and renovate. But what's a challenge is, again, how are we going to continue to build schools when we have a flat enrollment and we're shifting populations instead of thinking of closure and consolidation? So when we brought this to the board, we asked them, what do we do next? And in general, we were told to do one of two things or combo of both. And that's kind of where we came to the conclusion, if you want to keep all these priorities, and we have a $16 million gap that's going to perpetuate and multiply every year, how are we going to cover this? And that's when we talked to our tax attorney, and that tax attorney presented the options to us about what we could do, and that's how how the OLT came to life. So, that's a budget in a small analysis. And I know we have a lot more to do tonight, but I wanted to be able to try to express it in a way that you understand what's happening from a contextual standpoint and what's happening from all angles. Any questions that I can help answer based on what was presented? Yes.
You talk a lot about how that's kind of an unknown. How do you, when you're creating the budget, do you go off of prior years? Are you projecting something? I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
When you were talking about the SEEK funding, how do you project that for the future budget, whether that's using historical data or?
We use historical data and future projections, because we also know that SEEK changes from year to year depending on what the state provides. But I will tell you, this is a true analysis, and you can break it down, and we can send the data to this group. Let's say that the state provides $4,200 per kid. Fayette County typically gets $2,600 of that. It's because it's designed to be equitably distributed. Because in 1990, they found that there was basically funding was unconstitutional throughout Kentucky, and the education was not quality education was not being provided. So that's how SEEK came about. But I'm saying that because then we have to make up for that on a local effort side, and that's why you'll see when assessments go up, we could still reduce the tax rate and we still generate revenue.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just historically, when
Yeah.
you look year over year, is it, are you usually pretty on target with your SEEK estimate?
We were
Are you-
within like 25,000 this year.
Okay.
That's
Thank
pretty
you.
good out of, I think, 92, 93 million. And so next year we're projected higher because of transportation. Transportation, they're supposed to be actualizing some of that cost, and the percentage is going up. We hope it continues to go up, but we're also predicting that it won't hit exactly. So, but yes, ma'am. Good question. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the bus rental, so your rental income was a lot higher this year, and like the last couple of years, a lot higher. So why has that gone down so much?
A couple reasons why. Usage time and getting drivers was very difficult past a certain time. And so if you ask our principals, they needed buses beyond a certain time frame, and we could only generate the bus for a certain period of time. Does that make sense? So like we could only use it till this amount of time because we had to get drivers on bus routes, and they may need it for until 6 o'clock at night. So that was one of the reasons a lot of principals and folks stopped using our buses for rental costs.
So one other question on your revenue. Your miscellaneous revenues is down a lot in the last few years. What was that? Like, what were you guys getting?
That could have been, what page is that?
I looked at your budget on your website. You got a miscellaneous revenue line.
It depends. I mean, sometimes it's interfund transfers. We have indirect costs based on grants. I will tell you, miscellaneous was a whole lot higher because when we had ESSER, we were able to take indirect costs, and that was a significant millions of dollars that we were able to pull in. So that's probably part of it.
Has the board given consideration of reducing our contingency?
We have not brought that to them directly. I think that's something they would have to explore. But
because simple look at this, where contingency is 28 million more than what's required by the state.
right. However, it's supposed to be used for one-time expenses. Don't disagree, and that's something
Right.
we'd have to bring to the board to think about.
Well, I guess I'd be curious to how that contingency has trended over the last 5 to 10 years to know that is that 6% too high based on historicals, or is it in line with what has actually happened?
Based on information I received, the reason they did that was, I believe this happened in 2017-18 after, actually in the last audit, to create an experience where they had a contingency plan. And so they put that practice into play. But I was not there, so I don't know the exact specifics, but that's why they did the 6%. But that's something for sure. I mean, that's a great solution.
Seems like a pretty simple solution.
Yeah. So.
You mentioned the virtual academy tuition. Is that something where an infrastructure for that already exists? And do they have any kind of projections for how much revenue that could generate?
There's opportunity there for an entrepreneur model. I think that's something we'd have to explore and break down further. And the infrastructure would require obviously more teachers and more things that we'd have to think about in terms of expenses. But it's a different model because you may have to go even beyond, let's say, the boundaries of our district.
So you mentioned that this approximate $16 million shortfall could multiply, right? So I guess looking out, if it multiplies, it's not like adding. I mean, it moves quickly.
Yeah.
So in 4 or 5 years, what could that look like?
Well, if it's not addressing the short term is one thing, but addressing on the long term is another. So for example, what we project out becomes deficit spending. And there's a term in our financial people called leaky buckets. We will create a leaky bucket situation if we don't solve the problem of why there's a deficit spending model that could take place. And so just solving the contingency problem, we can't spend contingency forever. That would be an issue with that. But it could solve it on the front end, and then you'd have to think about what about future.
Can you talk just about your process to acquire grants and do you have a total of what you get off of grants right now?
Yeah, we have a rigorous process to get grants, but it's also based on the strategic plan and our needs. And we have a team. We have a grants and programming team. And so we look, for example, we got the Magnet Schools grant recently, and that's one of the biggest awarded grants in the nation. It's over $15 million. And so we pull in up to $42 million worth of grants, but a lot of that's Title I, things that we automatically receive based on certain populations of students that we have. And, that we also get Title II Title III and IV, Title III being migrant services, Title IV supporting our students and families. But I think overall, the goal is that we maintain and try to keep that same amount coming through so that we don't, and one thing we're looking at is we want this to be expenditures that serve our kids and not create just more staff that we may have to fund in the future.
I'm not 100% sure what my question is, but, and I hesitate to even bring it up, but I know that redistricting is probably somewhere on the horizon. And I'm just wondering, has there any math that's occurred that would provide some information on like consolidation of a school or filling up of a school, or is there anything like that that's been considered?
So there is a process that has to take place for redistricting to occur, and obviously the board has to be the ultimate decider. But there is an evaluation that is taking place every year on capacity of our buildings, what enrollment's going up and down. And so we're going to take some of those facts and figures, and as Dr. Liggins will work on this and his team, that'll be something we'll have to, if this group has that as a review for long-term strategy, we want to bring that to the board, but it depends on what this group decides to do or recommend, but for us to take action on it. But it would take several steps in reviewing the data, but there is data being reviewed, and yes, we have buildings that are not full, and we have buildings that are overfilled. Let's put it that way.
Okay, that's really, it would obviously be long-term because that's a process, but I just wondered if there was anything to look at there.
Yes, we would get that data for you all. Thank you, Ms. Paul.
Can you give a little more clarity on, I guess it's food service, or you mentioned that the board refuses to increase the cost of the price for lunch. What is the total that's coming in?
So we get a reimbursement cost for every student we serve, but it depends on the type of student, meaning there is a free and reduced lunch student. We have a student that's paid or that has to pay. And so those things, we can send you that data, but the challenge is as costs go up and we reduce something called our the campuses that have the free and reduced lunch students on site, it creates this, because it's a self-perpetuating fund, it's a self-supporting enterprise fund. And so they're like a business. And so if they don't get the revenues coming in, and revenues are starting to go up and up and up in costs. And so what's happening is if we don't make the appropriate changes, both in meal prices and looking and analyze how we're reviewing each campus, it can lead to that deficit.
Okay, I'm not sure I'm following all that, but I guess what I'm trying to get at is a potential solution of how much more revenue would be generated if my daughter who's paying $2.50 for lunch paid $3 instead. Not that everybody would pay an extra 50 cents, but those who are paying the price, like, what would that generate?
It could be somewhat significant. We can give you the exact figures, but like there's a certain reimbursement we get, and then like for example, one thing this board has agreed to do is that any student is not refused lunch. And so even if they're supposed to pay, they actually may not end up paying, we still serve them lunch. And so that's a cost too. So, yes, sir.
And I just want to make sure that I make this very clear. And I'm not sure, I heard someone say refuses or how. We have 5 board members that are volunteers that are committed to ensuring the success of the district. They're pulled in many different directions. They hear from families from all walks of life. And so they have to balance whether or not, you know, one of the things when you talk about the lunches, they have to balance that our budget is seeing the impacts of inflation. And so are our families seeing impacts of inflation. So when it comes to raising lunch prices, it's not necessarily saying we just refuse to do it. It's a matter of what's going to work for our families. Who are we hearing from? What are we hearing? What are we knowing? The same thing happens when it comes to all of these decisions. For example, the raise, for example. I heard a whole lot, our teachers are saying we're struggling as well. Just because inflation's impacting the district, it's also impacting us. So we also, and so it's not as, I don't want to paint the picture that we have board members that are not committed to this work and doing what we need to do. It's just that they have, just as all of us do, many constituents that they have to balance and make sure that they're making the best decision based off of the information that they have at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
About $261 million coming from the state, give or take. Do you know what percentage of that is actually federal pass-through dollars versus actually state-generated revenue?
Yeah, so when it says state, some of it is through local effort too. So I just want to make that clear. And we can get a percentage breakdown for you, but I don't have it right in front of me. Yeah.
Are there federal dollars actually baked into that are coming through to the state and then passing?
No, we typically, not necessarily, but we try to break those down, and typically it's in that 42 million that we talked about. Yeah, but it's a good question.
Dr. Barber,
Yes.
how would this working group do an analysis of potential assets that the district owns that may or may not be available for liquidation?
We can give you a listing, and you all could basically review what's available and what's opportunity. So definitely, we can hand it. Yes, we can make that available.
Can you give the group a little insight about how the decision-making process is for, and I'm looking at the reductions and eliminations slide that you had up here, the first line, department operating reductions, an additional 20%. Is there a formula? Is there just a percentage thrown out? How does that work?
That's for central office, by the way, so I just want to make sure that is not for school campuses. Basically, we looked at how much the district departments were spending and what they were spending it on. And then we took an analysis and broke it down based on the 10% reduction and said, we can look at this a little bit closer and see what we don't have to spend on, not required, or maybe we're not even spending on, and it's just a rollover. And so that's how it was analyzed and broken down. Yes,
And
ma'am.
then follow up on the last line, it said JDP and non-campus positions. Same question, how is that determined just for the?
That was for through attrition, basically. So any position that we felt like was at the JDP and not a campus support that we felt like didn't need to be filled, we just eliminated it.
Are the budgets prepared at the college level or at the central office level? And were the high schools or the schools levels? Obviously, I'm from college. And were those schools involved in
Absolutely.
budget reduction discussion or revenue generating discussion?
Well, so not budget reductions, so we didn't really reduce anything at the local level. But in terms of how they spend their money, every SBDM or site-based decision-making council receives something called Section 6 funds, and they get to distribute those in the categories that they wish and basically passed upon by the SBDM, and it's based upon their schedules. But their total allotment is given to them based on enrollment and need. And there is opportunity for application of something called Section 7, which is additional supports. So they have a weigh-in on that with their SBDMs. But in terms of the overall and staffing it is basically based on enrollment and ratio.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Anyone? Dr. Barber's giving you a lot of information. So how about we do this? We've been sitting for a while. How about we take about a 10-minute break? You can get some pizza, water, whatever you need to do, and we'll come back, and we're going to do some things that are at the group level, the process with all the information he gave you all, okay? So we'll take about a 10-minute break, and we'll come back and finish up. All right. Okay, folks, we're going to get back at it. Okay, so Dr. Barber gave you all a lot of information, and we asked some good follow-up questions. So what I'd like for you all to do, give you all an opportunity to actually talk with each other at your tables and in your groups. So think about all the questions, all the information he gave you all, and at your tables and in your groups, I'd like for you to think about what's going around in your head about the presentation that he just gave. There's a lot of information, right? He slid in a few acronyms on us. What struck you the most about Dr. Barber's presentation? And what 3 important points did you hear at your table during the discussion? And then select somebody to share out. So at this table, the 4 of you all discussed the 2 points. The 4 of you all right here, the 4 of you all, if you can turn and speak with them. Our great students, the 3 of you all, and then the 3 of you all. Think about the first 2. What is going on around your head about Dr. Barber's presentation? What struck you the most about the presentation? And then select a spokesperson to share out what 3 important points did you hear at your table. And then we'll have her share out, and then we'll wrap up, okay? We'll have about 10 minutes, okay? Have at it.
I'm really only 43. I'll tell you a funny anecdote. We love it. Please don't redistrict. Well, just within the last few months, the local planning was required by Kentucky Public Education just to let it out. And the same parents, in many cases, literally the same parents who just had younger children came to us and said, Lafayette and Lansdale, for example, saying, this school is old, it's terrible, and we need a new school. And actually, they, you know, they in one of the forums, and I said,
Have about 3 more minutes, and make sure you select a spokesperson. Okay, here we go, folks. Did everyone select a spokesperson? Yay, nay? You're the spokesperson? All right, we're going to start with back here with this group right here. All right, here we go, folks. Who's your spokesperson? Jessica? Yes, she is. All right, Jessica, they said you're awesome. So here you go.
Well, you all are going to have to help me.
Just share out some of the things you heard at your table.
I think one of the first things that we talked about was what stuck out to us, and I think you all are going to have to remind me because I think one of the things that stuck out was what Dr. Barber said around we're shuffling kids, we're building new buildings and shuffling kids, and we wonder what impact, and not closing some of those schools, what impact that's having on the overall budget and keeping every building that we have open. We also talked about dining and food, and the cost of that is continuing to rise. We understand and appreciate and respect the feeling of keeping the costs the same, specifically for our babies who need that support. But at some point, because of inflation, we may have to start looking at that as well and reconsidering what that looks like. And the contingency. That was another thing that stuck out, is that it's 2% required, right? But our board is at 6%. And how long can we continue to do that when we have this shortfall? And redistricting. I think somebody else said that, but I'll take the blame for it. And really looking at, as our population grows and our boundaries expand, the question came up was, when was the last time we redistricted? Anybody know that? 2017. And so, it may come to a point where we have to look at something like that instead of the reshuffling as we build more buildings.
All right. Give this group a hand. Good job. All right. Now, before I get to this group, y'all go ahead and select a spokesperson. I'll get over there and you all start doing it right when I get over there, right? So go ahead and do it now. Who's your spokesperson here? All right. You all took care of business.
So we talked a lot about what was going on in our head. This is a lot of information, and maybe we need more information. We perhaps would like to see a yearly budget comparison to see how we got to this complete recurring deficit. And maybe we would like to have some additional explanations on what some of the items really are and are made up of, as well as what were some of the other options that the attorneys talked about as far as revenue generating taxes or other revenue items. And then something that we also struck us and that we thought were important points is what we also heard was students are first, and that's the priority. So to continue to keep in mind, students are going to be impacted no matter what happens. So students are the priority. And then one thing we talked about is you have to live within your budget. Live within your budget.
All right, thank you. Give them a hand, please. Spokesperson.
You're already looking at me. We said a lot of similar things to other people. The first thing was just always we need more information. Obviously, we don't need a full line item budget, but maybe more. And then we talked about the contingency fund, about maybe that could go to 4%, but we realized that's kind of a short-sighted issue. We talked about, does that roll over? But then again, maybe that's a budget question, that where we need the more information. And then finally, we talked a little bit about school lunch, and we just collectively decided that anything that directly affects any services provided to children that we want to avoid while looking at other areas.
Give it up for him. Spokesperson.
Well, unfortunately, we were pretty similar. We talked about the contingency plan. We talked about the contingency fund. We talked about wanting to see some of the trends over the years in both revenue and cost to see where we could We also talked about specific line items, that there wasn't a whole lot of description, if we could have a little bit more of a breakdown for that. And then we also discussed school lunches as well. If the cost is going to keep going up, then that's going to continue to create a problem in the future if the prices don't go up.
I do have a question about the contingency fund. What kind of a fund is that held in? Like, does it accrue interest year to year?
You want to get it now? Okay.
So contingency is hypothetical because it's built into the budget of what you would have. So it's not a actual dollar amount. You see what I'm saying? So it's annual. Your rollover funding is actual money that you have. So.
Thank you. Give this group a hand. Spokesperson?
I think a lot of similar themes. One of the things we talked about that was a little different is we're opening more schools, but there are not going to be more kids. The student population is probably not going to grow. And so, has the school district looked at how much could they save by, in redistricting, shutting a school or two schools? What would you save by doing that? And, something that you talked about was, when they shut down a school, do they sell the building, and would they do that, or do they just repurpose it? There could be some money. I think people talked about real estate and trying to sell some of that. And are we phasing programs out? We start a lot of good programs, but when we do that, do we look at things and say, do we need to, shut this program down? And then finally, the contingency, going from 6 to 4% would cover the whole 16 million. So that's something that's good. And on the budget, just for everybody here, on the Fayette County's website, the detailed budget is out there, and it shows multiple year comparisons. So you can just go out there and search that, and and I'm sure they can give us more information, but it's out there now. So.
Okay. Good job. Give it up for them. Not to be biased, but our favorite group, the students.
So we talked about some things that were similar to other groups, but we also talked about, similar to what you all said, adding schools without closing schools. We wondered how that would affect the students by possibly being redistricted and everything, so like transportation factors into that. And we also wondered how you can add more schools without closing schools, because then somehow you would run out of space for them. We talked about a lot of substitutes and how they are demanding, or not necessarily demanding, but asking to be paid more. I guess from a high school perspective, we didn't understand that until Dr. Barber got on the topic of it, and we understood the budget more now since we had this in front of us than what we did previously to the meeting, because a lot of us didn't understand any of the budget. So I feel like we understood more of that. And we just also talked about a lot of things in the budget and how much is being reduced and eliminated compared to what we had been told or heard before.
All right. Good job. All right.
There's not much new to add. Everyone's hit on the same points of determining what we can do about the contingency fund, potential of analysis of our assets and possible liquidations, and how consolidation and redistricting would impact everything. So we're really still in an exploratory stage as this whole group works forward with some recommendations in mind. And we've got a lot more questions to ask, and one of those would be, as one of the solutions that has been presented is the OTL, and asking the question exactly what is that, who pays it, who is impacted by that in the community, and whether we have options on how much we would ask the community to invest if we did that too. Could there be a hybrid, sort of a shared pain between reductions and increase in attacks?
Give these guys a hand, please. So before we get to the next steps, are there any burning questions you need or have for Dr. Barber around his presentation? Okay, we got right here. Okay.
what's the 152 million in revenue for or on behalf payments exactly?
So that's just a pass-through coming from the state for benefits, and we just have to, it just basically comes through us, and we have to pay it out. So we don't really get to do anything with it. It can be a lot of things, but benefits, yeah, yeah.
Is the occupational license tax only on people who both work and live in Fayette County? Is that still the way it is?
That's correct.
So there's some unfairness in that whole scheme. Because if you live in another county and work in Fayette County, you don't pay for the services in Fayette County.
Correct. But that happens currently with the OLT.
Okay,
So the OLT exists already. This is just the recommendation that was brought to the board was a raising it from 0.5 to 0.75. So it's already here. It's already existing.
And that could be done without referendum?
Oh, no, it's under recall. It's required. It could have a recall.
But somebody has to get signatures?
There's a process to it.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
One of the proposals on the presentation was about cutting teachers' long-term disability benefits. Is there a way for us to get more information about what benefits they already get?
Yeah, so typically in the past, that's been optional. We can give all the benefits to you, but to give you long-term disability, it was offered the last 2 years based on, we were able to cover it because we had ESSER covering that cost, but here's the challenge now. We can't offer that because it would have to come out of general fund, and so that's why. ESSER was provided as part of COVID relief, and it was basically the third fund provided, ESSER ARP, and it was given by the federal government to help support schools and school systems and other city governments to combat both meeting kids where they are to bring them up for learning particular challenges, and also meeting staff where they are, and generally supporting overall schools districts to get out of the COVID era.
Thank you. What I heard from the groups, the themes were children first, all right? Not cutting services that impact children. We also heard that you all need a lot more information, right? And also it kept coming up was contingency, okay? We heard those things. Those are the common themes. There's other things, those are the common things that came out. So we have a little homework for you all as we wrap up. The materials in your binder, okay? Take a little deeper dive in those. And if you have any questions about the information that's in your binder, if you could submit those to Tracy Bruno by July 15th, okay? And this came up quite a bit just now. If you need any relevant information that will support the work group, can you request that by July 15th also? And so take a deeper dive in your binders and request any information. I think we caught some of it, but there's some other things you may look into it that you all need to do that. And so I think the whole purpose today was to lay the foundation of how the budget works and finances and things like that. I think we accomplished that. Are there any other questions? All right, we got to do the assessment again, the test. What is the primary goal of this work group? Someone please tell me. Free pizza. Outside of that, and it'll be pizza again tomorrow. Next time. What's the recommendations for the projected $60 million gap in the budget, and then also recommendations for long term. And I think you all mentioned some of the long term plans also. All right, we appreciate you all's time. Okay, you've been doing a lot of things, but I think the 42,000 kids in this district is worth our time. So I appreciate it, and thank you all, and you have a good evening. All right. Thank you. Mm-hmm.